What's up? I'm Michael Owens,
I'm Nick Southwood.
and we'll be previewing the Notre Dame Louisville football matchup tomorrow on Here Come the Irish. Let's get started.
Absolutely. So it looks like got Notre Dame playing Louisville this week. Game time is going to be October 17th at 2:30 p.m. Game's going to take place at Notre Dame Stadium. Beautiful time of year to be playing a game at Notre Dame Stadium. And when it comes to playing the Cardinals, the Irish are 1-1 all time against them, but coming off of a big win last year, beating them 35-17 at Louisville, I believe. And I believe you were in attendance at that game. Is that correct?
Absolutely, knocking another one off the bucket list. And you're talking about the weather. I forget what the weather's supposed to be like tomorrow in South Bend, but if it's anything like it was here today in Indianapolis, it's starting to get a little bit chilly. So
Absolutely.
hopefully here in 3 or 4 weeks it's snowing and extremely cold for the Clemson game. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, since they're not used to that kind of stuff, and Notre Dame definitely has been used to playing in that over the years.
Yeah, like you're saying, 1-1 all time. They'll be playing them a lot more since they joined the ACC. Last time they played in South Bend each other, that was back 2014. We all remember that game, so hopefully kind of get a win against Louisville at home and take control of the series. Last year, I think Louisville set an attendance record for the Irish, and they still had a decent amount of empty seats when I was there too, so I'm sure next time the Irish travel back there, they might set another attendance record for Louisville. But let's kind of dive deeper into the Louisville specifically.
Absolutely. With Louisville, their head coach there, Scott Satterfield, with the 2020 record this year of only 1-3, so not really getting off to that great of a sophomore start for him. After a fairly decent 8-5 record last year, going 5-3 in the ACC. Preseason ranked this year, so after the showing last year, they thought they may make a little bit of jump, make a little bit of noise this year. But really, it's the second year slump is kind of hitting Louisville pretty hard. But obviously, Satterfield's a good coach, going 51-24 during his tenure at Appalachian State. But it just really doesn't look like the Louisville team is performing up to the expectations of what people thought at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, last year it seems like they everything was going right for Satterfield. I mean, first year don't really have a whole lot of pressure. 8-5, 5-3. I don't remember if they won their bowl game or not. Seems like everything was going right in the freshman year, and they got the preseason ranking this year. They had a lot of guys I remember from last year's team. I thought they were gonna be better preseason ranked, but like we said, the sophomore slump, it seems like that happens. A lot of coaches lost across the country. Like their second year, they go down a little bit. But I expect him to be there for the next couple of years. And like you said, 51-24 at Appalachian State, and he was over there when they became like official Division I program, and they were ranked several the last couple of years, and that was due in large part because of him. So he's a really good coach, and I expect Louisville to be give Notre Dame a really good game. I expect Louisville to have one of their best games of the year. They're going to South Bend. I mean, it's a great chance for them to turn their season around. It's like we always say, Notre Dame gets everyone's best game. I think Louisville will be ranked here the next couple of years, but I think they're going to give Notre Dame their best chance.
Yeah, obviously, when people come to Notre Dame, that's their biggest game of the year, even bigger than some of their bowl games at times. But definitely, as a coach, you've seen what he's able to do at Appalachian State, and it takes a couple years for him to get his own recruits in there, so I feel like once he gets his own recruits, he'll be able to definitely turn the program around and make them a very winning program again.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, 4 or 5 years ago, they had Lamar Jackson, who were like a top 5 team in the country, almost won at Clemson with Lamar Jackson. I remember they smoked Florida State, who was ranked by like 42 points or something crazy. I mean, they did have Lamar Jackson. Years back, they had Teddy Bridgewater as well. So, I mean, they're a quality program. They had Bobby Petrino there, I think, when Lamar Jackson was quarterback. So, they'll get things turned around. They're a decent program. I expect them to be towards the top of the ACC here in a couple of years.
Absolutely.
And then, if you want to kind of talk about Louisville's quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. Malik Cunningham, 73 for 124 on the season, which 58.9%. You'd like to see that higher for a starting quarterback in college football. But he does have 9 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, so at least he's on the positive side of that there. And on the ground, obviously, he's ran quite a bit, 49 attempts for 84 yards, although that's only just 1.7 yards per carry. That's not really that good, and they have 3 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, then the next point we have, too, is like those yards per carry for quarterbacks are kind of misleading sometimes because he has been sacked 14 times. So I think a lot of times you do get sacked and stuff. That stuff takes in consideration those rushes, too, and their negative yards. So I was watching some of the plays last week against Georgia Tech, and I saw him tuck the ball and run a couple times, and we'll get to it here in a second, but Notre Dame last weekend had trouble with the quarterback option. I think for the Irish, that was Florida State's third quarterback, and I think when Miami played Florida State a couple weeks ago, they were playing with the different quarterbacks, and they didn't have it figured out. Notre Dame faced the quarterback last week of for Florida State, who had a really good decent. He was a mobile quarterback, and that kind of gave fits to their defense. So that rushing quarterback may have gives Notre Dame some fits this weekend.
Absolutely.
Like I said earlier, so Jordan Travis, he almost put up 100 yards against Notre Dame. He was the quarterback rushing, so that gives me a little bit worried headed into this week. I mean, I don't think Louisville's going to put up a ton of points, but it could cause a little bit of problems for Notre Dame's defense.
Yeah, and definitely don't want to get behind early. Just you don't want to put any more pressure than you have to on your offense. So just making sure that they're containing Jordan there at the beginning of the game, it just definitely will help the offense as well.
For sure. So that was Louisville's offense, and then moving over to Louisville's defense. Okay, this is where we got some problems coming here. Cardinals have given up 34. All right, we're back. They gave up 46 points to Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets last Saturday. I mean, Notre Dame offense had a really good run game last week, and they put up 52 points against South Florida. I feel like they're getting a little bit better each week, and once they start getting some more guys back. So, I mean, the Cardinals' defense, 34 points per game against Notre Dame. That's the big problem this week.
Absolutely. Definitely would look to see Notre Dame hopefully put up 4 or 5 touchdowns and sprinkle in a few field goals there as well to hopefully get more than the 34-point average that they give up, inching closer to the 46 points that they allowed against Georgia Tech.
And we're not going to really dive any deeper to any more specific players on the Louisville offense or defense. I mean, the kind of 46 points to Georgia Tech last week and how many points they give up per game I think is well enough for that subject. Not want to underestimate our opponents, but I feel like going a little too nitpicky on some players might be a little too much. But let's move on to Notre Dame. So the first thing we see is the turnovers last week. That was a major problem. So Kyron Williams fumbled the ball early in the game on Notre Dame's territory. Then also we had a muff punt last week, which put Florida State in great field position. It was going to be a bigger blowout than it was. And then Notre Dame almost muffed the punt twice. The ball was like inches away from hitting the returner. So they almost had 3 turnovers last week. I mean, that's all and well against teams like Florida State, but when you play North Carolina, maybe even Boston College and Clemson, you cannot afford that, especially those like Clemson, North Carolina. You can't afford those turnovers against teams like that and still expect to win the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys like Trevor Lawrence, they're going to definitely take advantage of any sort of turnover and definitely make you pay for that. So you definitely can't make mistakes like that. And I'm sure Brian Kelly and the coaching staff is definitely going to make sure that, that gets hammered in hard this last week at practice so that doesn't happen again this game and especially moving forward as well.
Sure, what's up? We got Bryce Harper in the lobby. He's taking a break from his batting practice, it looks like, to join us and working on the biceps out there. And then also, I mean, I want to be kind of realistic about what they did last week, but I mean, all in all, they have a 21 home win streak. I think it's going to go 22 this weekend, and a 9-game win streak overall. Got a little runny nose there. So, I mean, you can't really complain too much of those win streaks. I think 9-game win streak might be one of the best in the country. Maybe like, I think heard Air Force or something like that has maybe more. But, I mean, those win streaks, you really can't complain too much with that.
Absolutely. Ranked number 4, win these games. Obviously, that's all they can do. But, obviously, the biggest game of the year definitely going to be against Clemson. Definitely got to see how that game plays out. But, Irish definitely just got to keep getting better and better every week building up to that game. That way they can go into it with a little bit of swagger and a little bit of confidence and definitely give Clemson a run for their money.
For sure. Like you said, I mean, ranked number 4 in the country. So let's think about this. Big Ten and the Pac-12 still aren't playing. The only team in the Pac-12 that maybe had a Notre Dame right now if they were playing was maybe Oregon, I think. Mm-hmm. Kind of 50-50 on that one. Ohio State would probably be ranked ahead of Notre Dame if they were playing as usual. Penn State kind of maybe yes or no if they're ranked ahead of Notre Dame. So number 4 is about right where they would be at if everything was normal. And, I mean, you can't really complain. Number 4 team in the country, as long as they keep winning. Like, it's not going to matter how much they beat Louisville by this weekend as long as they beat them because everyone's going to remember, did they lose to Clemson? Was it a close loss? Did they beat Clemson? Like, it's not going to matter these games. It's got to, as long as they win these games, it's not really going to matter the score.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And then how they play against North Carolina, obviously. So, Notre Dame offense specifically, I'm going to give them a grade of a B overall. They scored 42 points last week, but they're still not balanced with that passing attack. I mean, I think they were trying to run it down Florida State because they had done that in the past in 2018. I mean, 353 rushing yards led by Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree. So I give Notre Dame's offense a B, and that's kind of as a respect to their offense, their expectations. I'm not doing it to offenses in general. Like their offense is probably an A overall compared to most teams in college football. But as far as their own perspective, I give them a B. I mean, they still scored 42 points, but I mean, Florida State was awful too, so that's what my grade was.
Yeah, I would say my grade there probably going to be a B plus. Obviously, in order to get to that A level, you're definitely going to want to see Ian Book be able to throw the ball maybe 30, 35 times a game instead of just the 25 times that he threw it last week. But again, Tommy Rees as a rookie offensive coordinator there wanted to make sure he controlled the game against a lesser team like Florida State. So want to make sure that your defense and your running game is what's going to guarantee you, winning a football game there against a lesser opponent. But definitely look for them as the season goes on to start opening up the offense a little bit more for Ian Book and start letting him throw the ball 30, 35 times a game.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like that person saying, oh, they're running too much or they're passing too much, because I feel like there's those fans out there that's always going to say, oh, you're running too much this time. I think it's been a decent blend recently. Obviously, you could run a lot against Florida State, but I'm thinking that Notre Dame is definitely going to need to work on I'm just saying that they need to have their passing attack more in tune before they play Clemson. Like, it's fine running, but you're not going to be able to. I don't think you're going to be able to run all over Clemson and win the game that way. You're going to have to prepare for that passing attack. So if we're not preparing leads against teams against Louisville and Pittsburgh before we play Clemson, we're going to be in trouble trying to get that passing attack figured out against them.
Absolutely, and definitely controlling the tempo of the game and the timing of possession obviously is huge. But against a team like Clemson that has such big play potential, you can't really play it like that against them. You need to have ace in the hole that if you need to go out there and sling the ball, that Ian Book can get out there and is used to throwing the ball enough that he can put up enough stats in order to keep you guys close.
For sure. We had a question, which you had down here in our notes, about as far as Notre Dame not showing everything. I feel like they've done this in the past, and I feel like they're maybe doing this now, like they're not showing everything before the Clemson game. I was telling Nick, it's not really worked out in the past. I feel like they haven't opened up all their plays and stuff. We see some plays in the big games we didn't see elsewhere, but I mean, a lot of the big games they haven't won, so I don't know if that's going to work out against Clemson. I'm hoping that maybe they're keeping some stuff up their sleeves before the Clemson game. I don't think they have to show their trick plays or their, more in-depth passing plays and stuff like that a lot until they actually play Clemson in order to win. So hopefully they're kind of saving some stuff for that Clemson game. Biggest weakness on defense right now, I see that question on there. I would say their biggest weakness are the cornerbacks right now. They're kind of exposed a little bit last week against Florida State with some big plays, and then obviously Clemson's got Trevor Lawrence and great talent at the wide receiver position, so I think it's our biggest weakness on defense. I think we've got strong linebackers, safeties, and defensive line, just the cornerbacks, so they get those one-on-one matchups. Will they be able to hold up against the Clemson wide receivers, which we'll discuss later. But like you're saying, on offensively, Javon McKinley, I believe he's a fifth-year senior, 5 receptions for 107 yards. Braden Lindsey, 3 catches. Michael Mayer, 2 touchdowns, and Tommy Tremble, 1. So McKinley, I was telling you earlier, this dude's he could be a beast like Brian Kelly. He's like he has those games like that. I believe last year had a big game too. It's like whether he shows up or wants to become a beast in that game too. He's got a lot of potential. We'll see if he can have a great game and build off that from last week. Braden Lindsey, I know he was injured like to start the year. Might have had maybe had COVID or something along those lines. He wasn't playing at the beginning of the year. Mm-hmm. So 3 catches. He's a speedster. Michael Mayer, he's like the baby Gronkowski, man. He's a true freshman. He's already like one of the best tight ends. I think he's going to be one of the best tight ends in the country. And then Trimble, like Tommy Trimble was our go-to receiver in the first 2 games, and he only had 1 catch last week. So my thoughts here on offense, like the receivers, the biggest question mark on offense is the receivers. Like, it's a new guy each week. Like, it was McKinley and Trimble only had 1 catch. So who are our go-to receivers? There's really no one you can throw up to, like Commit or Claypool or Will Fuller or one of those guys, Floyd or Eifert. There's no like that go-to receiver we're going to need against Clemson right now, so hopefully we can get that figured out. But then I was telling you this as well. Kevin Austin Jr. might be our best receiver. I don't even know if he has a catch on the year. Ben Skoranek, the transfer from Northwestern, he still hasn't played that much. Those 2 guys. So I feel like we have a lot of talent at the receiver position. We just got to have those guys start stepping up and use the passing attack more. But we really don't need to right now until we play Clemson, but I'd like to see it. You know what I mean? We got to practice a little bit before then.
Yeah, and I think that definitely goes along with them, holding some things back when it comes to playing Clemson, because if Clemson is preparing for Notre Dame and they don't see those guys because they were resting and getting healthy before that game, then there could be some big play potential there that Clemson doesn't really recognize by any film that could really help Notre Dame in that Clemson game.
For sure. Last bullet point we got on the offense is they still got a lot of work to do before the Clemson game. I mean, we know we have like one of the best offensive lines in the country, but we also did back in 2017. The offensive line wasn't enough to beat Georgia. It also wasn't enough to beat who else did they lose to back in 2017? Trying to remember off the top of my head.
That wasn't the year they lost to Michigan, was it?
No, they lost to, I believe they lost at Stanford that year as well. I'm trying to think. They lost to at Stanford, I believe, that year, 2017. But I'll have to double check that. But the offensive line in 2017 wasn't enough to win it all. And Brandon Wimbush, love him to death, but he wasn't that quarterback to win a championship. So we're going to have to see if Ian Book is. Like, I don't know if he is. Like, right now he's more of I would say he's one of the better quarterbacks in the country, but he's not one of the elite ones yet. He hasn't earned that. So he's going to have to play up to Trevor Lawrence level, some of these other great quarterbacks. And then also the receivers are going to have some go-to receivers step up for that game as well.
Yeah.
Stanford, Miami, Georgia. Sorry, doing the podcast, it's kind of hard to remember stuff off the top of your head. So
definitely.
Those are the teams we lost to that year. So.
Yep. But definitely, with Trevor Lawrence, obviously he gets so much hype and he gets so many looks at because he throws the ball so many times a game. Obviously with Tommy Rees being a rookie offensive coordinator and him trying to get adjusted to play calling and all that kind of stuff, it's going to, as the season goes on, I think we'll see Book kind of grow more and more as he gets more and more opportunity to throw the ball.
Oh, we got Brooks Riley, our buddy, joined the podcast here. What's up, Brooks? So Notre Dame defense, I give them a grade of C for last week, and that's compared to Notre Dame's standard. Like, if this was a normal college football team, I wouldn't give them a C, but compared to Notre Dame, they never give up hardly any points per game. They're always, they only give up one touchdown coming into this game. So I give them a C compared to what they normally are. I think they'll bounce back this week. But overall, Notre Dame's defense is usually always consistent. Last year against Michigan was kind of a fluke, but you can always count on Notre Dame's defense for the most part.
Absolutely, and obviously, it's tough when you get put in pitiful situations like they did last week because of bad special teams or any turnovers, anything like that puts them in a bad position and makes it more difficult for them to do their job. So as long as special teams is doing their job and the offense is doing their job, I think you won't see any issues with the defense, especially this week.
For sure, and I'm trying to put it in perspective too. Alabama gave up 48 points to Ole Miss, and I believe Ole Miss and Alabama total like the most yards in SEC history. So 48 points Alabama's defense gave up. LSU surrendered 45 points to Missouri, and they won the title last year. North Carolina gave up 45 points to Virginia Tech. So trying to be a little bit realistic here as far as expectations, not trying to be too extreme one way or the other. Notre Dame's defense is holding opponents to 13 points per game. Even after last week, holding opponents to 13 points per game, that's one of the best in the country. Like you said, just a second, put in awful situations. Like if you're watching the game, I think Notre Dame might have fumbled anywhere between a 30, 40-yard line. And that's they gave up, a 3-and-out, and gave up 3 points, and they didn't even get a first down, Florida State. And then also the muff punt, Florida State had to go 20 yards to score a touchdown. And that gave them a lot of momentum. But all in all, Florida State did put up 405 yards of total offense against Notre Dame, so you can't really put that on the offense and special teams so much because it's kind of a little bit of both. Almost gave up 100 yards rushing to the quarterback for Florida State, so that's something we're going to take a look at, especially when it's Clemson. Even if you do shut down their running game with ETN and receivers, they still got that triple threat with Trevor Lawrence. Like last year, they were shutting down the passing game and Travis Etienne against Ohio State. Trevor Lawrence tucked the ball and ran for 80 yards, and Trevor Lawrence can run when he has to, and all else breaks down, so you're going to have to be prepared for that moving forward.
Absolutely, and obviously, Lawrence is pocket passing quarterback first, but it is nice when you have a quarterback like that just can sit there and throw the ball over the field, but also if he needs to tuck the ball and run, that he can. And obviously, from watching Jordan Travis, Notre Dame has definitely some work to do in order to kind of plan for that up until when they actually play Clemson.
And speaking of running quarterbacks, Ian Book, I feel like a lot of quarterbacks late in their careers at Notre Dame or college, they try to stay in the pocket a little bit more. Well, it's a good thing to do, especially if you're trying to get drafted in the NFL. You got to show you can stay in the pocket, but hey, man, we played Clemson. I want Ian Book to tuck it and run, get 4 yards. If you see 4 yards and you're trying to sit there in a pocket and try to be perfect or something, just tuck it and run, get those 4 or 5 yards. Against these teams, hopefully we can win with you staying in the pocket, maybe throwing it away. But anytime we play Clemson, one of those big games, let's get those rushing yards. And Book plays best when he gets an action to catch back up.
There we go.
All right, we are on our predictions. Thanks for everybody watching. Yeah, Lawrence is sneaky fast too. I believe he was the one last week who muffed the punt. He's got a lot of potential there in the kick return game and the punt return game. He's, I think, next season, hopefully this year too, you'll see him more in the slot as a receiver. Moving on to the predictions, number 15, BYU at Houston. Who you got?
I think I got to go with BYU. I think they're playing really well this year, ranked number 15, and against a Houston program who's really not kind of performing up to their potential this year.
Yeah, I got BYU as well. I haven't watched a lot about both these programs, but I've seen BYU's quarterback's been lining up. He's might be in like a late push for the Heisman as well, like a dark horse. So I got BYU as well.
And then next game we got here is going to be Kentucky at Tennessee. Tennessee's ranked 18th this season. Who you got?
I'm picking Tennessee. I mean, they were close last week against Georgia. It's at Tennessee. It's a big rivalry game. I think Tennessee's kind of on the up and up. I got Tennessee winning this.
I actually got Kentucky pulling off the upset here this week. And, you know, as an IU basketball fan, it kills me to say, but I just think that Kentucky's going to be able to go in there, and I think they're actually going to be able to play well enough to take one away from Tennessee.
All right, moving on to number 11, Texas A&M at Mississippi State. Texas A&M had the big upset against Florida last week at home. They go on the road to Mississippi State, who I believe only put up like 2 points against Kentucky. It's crazy because KJ Costello set this SEC passing record in week 1 at LSU, and I think he got benched last week. So who knows what's going on there at Mississippi State in the air raid offense. I think Texas A&M is going to win it on the road, but I can see this Texas A&M getting beaten in an upset game because I think they're always overrated. So
yeah, I'm the same way. I definitely picked Texas A&M here just with all the questions at quarterback at Mississippi State. But like you said, if they get a guy out there that's throwing 5 touchdowns and setting the SEC passing record, then it's definitely a possibility that they can come out and beat Texas A&M.
For sure. We've got Boston College at number 23, Virginia Tech. I believe Boston College is yet to wait. No, they lost North Carolina, but I think that's the only loss that they have. So both these teams look pretty decent to start the season. Still early, though. I got Virginia Tech winning because it's a home game.
Absolutely, same. You know, that Virginia Tech's a crazy place to play, and just ranked number 23rd right now, so definitely going to try to keep, you know, that winning streak alive and keep moving up in the rankings as if they can go ahead and knock them off at home.
For sure. Irish will see Boston College later in the year, and we had Doug Flutie follow this podcast here about a month ago, messaged him, so sorry, Flutie, if you're watching this and picked against your Eagles. And then we got probably the biggest game, obviously the biggest game besides Notre Dame Louisville. We've got number 3 Georgia at number 2 Alabama. So I think Nick Saban has yet to lose against any of his assistant coaches. I'm not sure if he's tested negative yet for COVID. And this is kind of the big story of the week throughout the sports world, is that he came down with COVID. So, I mean, I'm expecting him not to be there, but knowing Nick Saban in Alabama, he might be up in some quarantine press box or something like that. They might find a way to get him there on the field. And they were saying on television, too, the only way he can coach is if he's like actually in the press box or in the stadium. He can't coach or do anything remotely.
Yeah, obviously, you know, when you have a coach of that caliber and he's just such a brilliant mind, you definitely want to have him there for every single game that's played. So I could definitely see them putting him in his own press box, quarantined from everything else. And, you know, a lot of people actually like calling the game from up at a press box because it gives them a bigger view of the field.
I think Tommy Rees does. He calls it plays up in the press box for now.
Yep, so we could maybe even see a better Nick Saban even with COVID, so who knows.
So my prediction in this game, I mean, I just told you, I forgot how many yards, but Alabama gave up, and they gave up 40.8 points to Ole Miss. I know they're playing at home. We know they'll probably have more amount of fans there than they probably should have to make it loud because it's a big game, because they probably care about winning down there. You know that. So they probably have a lot of fans there. It's going to be at Alabama, but, I mean, Georgia's one of the few well-rounded teams. Like, right now it's Clemson and everybody else. Like, Clemson's got a great offense, a great defense, great coaches, and everything like that. Georgia is still trying to figure it out on offense a little bit. I know they have a good defense. I think Georgia's probably the closest team in the country that's like as a full well-rounded right now. I think Georgia's going to go into Alabama and win the game. They've had a lot of heartbreaking losses to Alabama over the last several seasons. But I think Georgia is a more well-rounded team. They have a better defense right now than Alabama does. So I'm going to pick Georgia to win this game.
Yeah, I would think about picking Georgia here, but just after completely getting spanked last week and giving up 48 points on defense, I think Nick Saban lit a match under the boys this week, and I think that they're going to get the job done at home as they need to.
It's crazy to think, too. So if one of these teams loses, Notre Dame's going to automatically move up to number 3. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if Clemson and Notre Dame take care of business, at worst, it should be number 1 versus number 3. Maybe number 1 versus number 2. So I know I think Georgia probably, if schedule's like normal, they should be playing Florida here pretty soon. So if Florida can upset them, and assuming the polls don't put Ohio State ahead of Notre Dame, and these are a lot of ifs, it could easily number 1 Clemson versus number 2 Notre Dame. And that would be the game of the century. That would be awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I mean, heck, that's like 3 or 4 weeks away. But let's move on to Notre Dame Louisville predictions here. I have the Irish winning 34-17, really similar to last season. I think Louisville hasn't played really good this year, but they're going to be in South Bend. They're going to be wanting to turn their season around. They're going to be really motivated. So I think they're going to put up a pretty decent fight. Like I said, their quarterback can run. That gave Notre Dame a little bit of fits last week. I think Notre Dame's going to continue to improve on offense. I'd love to see them blow them out. I hope I'm wrong, but I just got the Irish winning 34-17.
Yeah, I definitely think that we're going to see, Ian Book step up, maybe throw the ball a little bit more this game. Definitely think that Notre Dame's defense is going to show up and keep them to 17 points, but I like Notre Dame's offense to score 5 touchdowns and then be able to get a field goal as well to win 38-17.
All right. Well, let's see. We got comments on here. Coach Saban tested negative. I know. I could swear I saw something on TV though earlier this week. It said they have to, even if they do test negative, or once they have to stay in quarantine for 7 days. I'm not sure what all the rules are for the SEC, but any way he can get on the field, he's going to. We got 42-17 prediction. Pitt always scares me. Pitt's like that Purdue, Boston College. Like Pitt always seems like those teams always give Notre Dame fits, and it's at Pitt too. And they got Pat Narduzzi, who's always got those really good defenses. He was known for that as his defensive coordinator at Michigan State. So that game scares me too. I'm not sure what the one is right before Clemson, but whoever Notre Dame plays right before Clemson, that's going to scare me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I see we got who's winning the Big Ten on there. I think that's obvious. Ohio State's going to win the Big Ten, as far as we can see.
Well, I think who's going to win the Big Ten? We've got a lot of questions flying here. Whoa, can't keep them up. Who's going to win the Big Ten? I got Ohio State, but Penn State. I think Penn State's right there. I was going to pick Penn State to win the Big Ten if they had like full stands, because the whiteout there at Penn State and Ohio State's going there. Now it's not going to be as crazy when Ohio State has to go on the road to Penn State. I haven't checked their schedule, but if it's the same, if they're still going at Penn State, because before the season started, that's what it was supposed to be. So I'm assuming they're on the schedule.
I see they're talking about getting Kevin Austin involved tomorrow, and then definitely need him against Clemson. Definitely, we were talking about that balance earlier of trying to get him involved versus, maybe saving some packages or something like that where he's a major threat going into the Clemson game. So kind of got to weigh those two, the coaching staff does, when it comes to getting them super involved versus just keeping them involved enough for them to win games until they get to Clemson.
Yeah, Kevin Austin Jr., he coming off that foot surgery, but yeah, right now they're kind of easing him back in there for the Clemson game. Keep him healthy for that Clemson game because we're definitely going to need him. I've heard he's like so many good things at practice, but he's like one of the best receivers. He's super fast and stuff, so hope to see it. Let's see. Remember, all these questions are rolling in here late.
We're talking about Pittsburgh when Tua had an ejection was the last time that there's somebody said on there.
Who do you think our best receiver is? Right now, I think our best receiver, I guess you call receiver, is Tommy Tremble. I think he might have the most catches on the season. He's a versatile receiver, like at the tight end position in the slot. But who has the most talent and potential? I would probably say the most potential is Kevin Austin Jr. has the most potential, so we'll see what's going on with that. Justin Fields is insane. He's going to be one of the first round picks. Ohio State. If you guys got any questions, let us know. We got a lot of questions rolling in here before we get off the podcast. Let's see how long we've been on this. About 20, 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Javon McKinley, he's got a lot of... we just listed like 7 or 8 Notre Dame receivers. They got a lot of potential. McKinley's big receiver. Lindsey's super fast. Kevin Austin Jr. is super fast. Trimble, he's really physical. He can get open. We got Michael Mayer, who's the next Gronkowski.
Yeah, and if you look at the stats for McKinley, it actually almost looks DK Metcalf-esque with, 4, 5, 6 catches for over 100 yards. That big play potential is going to be something that's huge when it comes to playing Clemson for sure.
Oh, Notre Dame going at North Carolina here. That's probably the biggest game besides Clemson on the schedule. Mac Brown, that dude was calling games and being an analyst forever, and he came back there at North Carolina. He's turned the program around with recruiting. That's another big one, too. Sam Howell's one of the better quarterbacks in the country, so that's going to be a tough challenge for Notre Dame as well. I also think it's going to be tough that Notre Dame's used like one of their bye weeks and stuff earlier in the year. They got the game pushed back, that Wake Forest game, to the end of the schedule. So after Clemson, man, they're playing a lot of games. They might have one bye week remaining, but the rest of the year they got a lot of games. They're going to get tired. That's going to play another team's favor. NC versus Notre Dame. Okay. Kyron Williams, I believe he's a sophomore, but he still might have 3 years after this to play, because I don't know if he played in over 4 games last year. So Kyron Williams is, Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree, dude. When you start, I know you've been busy on Saturdays. You start watching all these games. Best running backs duos Notre Dame's had since they come to South Bend. Usually it's like running back. When Quentin Nelson and McGlinchey were there, it's kind of hard not to run through those holes.
Right.
These guys like Kyron Williams, boom, lost 2 yards, turns it into 3 yards. He gets stopped at the 1 yard line on the goal line, breaks tackle and jumps in. This dude, He's good. He can catch the ball. I mean, he's the best running back Notre Dame's had in a while. Then Chris Tyree, he's learning. He's learning how to pass block and those sorts of things. Like against Clemson, you might not see a lot of Chris Tyree because he's still trying to figure out all the plays, the scheme, the pass blocking like the younger guys do. But man, that dude is one of the fastest guys on the team. Once if he's like level someone, he's past him. It's awesome.
Absolutely.
Best talent we've had at running back in a long time. What questions we got on here?
So the game is on a Friday. The Black Friday is the game that they play. North Carolina.
I don't know. They're not playing. I don't think they're playing anybody on Fridays.
The game is a Friday too.
Does Notre Dame have the best O-line? Well, we're obviously biased and haven't watched like probably 95% of the other offensive lines in the country besides just quick tune-ins to the game. But I really think they do have one of the best offensive lines. I mean, a couple years ago they won the Joe Moorhead Award with Quentin Nelson and McGlinchey. And then this year they got Liam Eichenberg, who's going to be one first, second round pick. Tommy Kramer's good. Jarrett Patterson, like all these guys are getting good grades as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It almost feels like Notre Dame is the Dallas Cowboys of offensive line. Always having a great offensive line to be able to protect their quarterbacks and open up holes for the running backs. So I definitely think that that plays into how good that their offense is going to be, especially this week against Louisville.
For sure. I mean, if Notre Dame always recruits really well at certain positions. I mean, almost every school has certain positions they recruit really well at. Only like a few, like 3 or 4 schools in the country can recruit well at every single position. Notre Dame's best position is probably recruiting at is offensive line, tight end. Those guys, I mean, once you build that legacy, like Rocco Spindler there in Michigan, I mean, kind of put him over the edge. I mean, if you're an offensive line recruit, you see Quentin Nelson, McGlinchey, Zach Martin, Nick Martin, all these guys in the NFL. Heck, Alex Barr's got to play for the Bears. Sam Mustford might be playing for the Bears too. Like all these, that's just to name a few. All these guys and the legacy they're building, and guys they have there now too. I mean, why would you not want to go to Notre Dame? And they enjoy pancaking guys.
Absolutely, and they got a couple questions in there, or one of them is a statement. Said we're playing at Ohio State in 2 years.
Yeah, I'll be at that game. Hopefully.
That will be an insane game.
Oh, Liam Eichenberg. This dude last week, man, he got his eye poked. I'm like, what's he walking off the field for? Like he lose a contact? Like he's one of those people don't walk off. I'm like, okay, something had to be wrong with this dude's big offensive lineman. His whole eye was completely swollen shut, and he got back out there, dude. That's just intimidating. We usually don't get this many people late in the podcast. Usually towards the end of a half an hour, we don't have this many people. If you guys got any questions, let us know.
Got a question there that says, do you think we can beat Clemson? I absolutely do think we can beat Clemson. We absolutely have to play our perfect game, though. Ian Book has to be on. Like you said earlier, he has to be able to take those yards in the running game when they're there. And the defense is just going to have to play out of their mind in order to stop ETN, stop their receiving core, and stop Trevor Lawrence from also being able to scramble out of the pocket and making things happen with his legs.
All right, completely agree on that. Completely agree. Notre Dame's going to have a good game to beat Clemson. I agree. I think Notre Dame can beat Clemson, but last time, so let's take a look at the last 2 times we played Clemson. College football playoffs, our defense was holding up, and we had Julian Love, one of the best cornerbacks. He should have won like the best cornerback in the country award. Mm-hmm. And he went out and they scored 3 touchdowns on his backup. All due respect, I forget who the backup was. The Notre Dame defense was holding into there in the game, but they were on the field the whole game. It's the offense who couldn't move the ball. So I think it's our offense. How can they do against Clemson? I mean, I definitely think we can beat them. If this was a situation where Notre Dame Stadium was completely full, I was like, okay, this is going to be like the USC 05 kind of game, number 1 versus facing them. But I definitely think we can beat Clemson. And as far as when we played them back in, I think it was 2015, I mean, we lost by 2 points and missed a 2-point conversion to almost send the game into overtime at Clemson. That was kind of when Clemson was starting up. So we definitely can. It just depends on whether it's not going to be one of those games where in the big games Notre Dame has 2 outcomes. Like they barely lose, like at Georgia last year, and then they played Georgia at home in 2017 where they barely lost. Or it's going to be one of those get destroyed at Miami several years back, or get destroyed at Michigan. And then, several years back, they barely lost at Florida State. So it's like half the games and the big ones, they get smoked. Half of them, they barely lose. I don't know which one I prefer, neither, but I guess that's kind of a long story for that answer.
I will say at the Clemson game, definitely they need to figure out a way that they jump on them early because, like you said, if the defense is always on the field and they're always playing from behind, that makes it way tougher on Notre Dame to do.
Yeah.
So if they can jump out to a 7 or 14-point lead and put the pressure on Clemson, you might see maybe Trevor Lawrence, make a mistake or something like that really gets the defense, hyped up, feeling good about being out on the field quite a bit.
So what did teams used to do? So we're Colts fans here. That answers the questions. What did teams do when they were playing Peyton Manning? What would you expect Notre Dame to do differently than they played him last time, which you were discussing when Notre Dame plays them? Is to control the ball. You want to keep Trevor Lawrence off the field. That's what like Navy does to Notre Dame. They try to do some of these other programs. Stanford tries to do Notre Dame because they don't have as much talent. I mean, not saying that Notre Dame and Clemson have about the same talent, but I mean, Clemson's obviously the number one team in the country for a reason. Notre Dame would like to want to control that game against Clemson. Run the ball, get first downs, Ian Book run, control that game, keep the defense healthy, because if you keep going 3 and out against Clemson like you did in the college football playoffs, the defense is going to break at some point.
Absolutely. Just like you're talking about, against Peyton Manning, what did the Patriots and the Chargers always do when they beat the Colts? They had LaDainian Tomlinson and Darren Sproles with the Chargers, who ran the ball, 40 times a game between the two, and the Patriots just always had a better defense and a better run game. So that was the outcomes. That's why the Colts always lost, and why I'm scarred with football emotionally as a kid.
For sure, you can't get your all, even no matter how good you are, if you only got like a few possessions. Like when Notre Dame plays Navy, they got to score every single time. Because they don't get that many possessions. It's hard to get your offense rolling when you're not out there much. Heck, you play the Big 12, you get like 50 possessions each side.
Absolutely.
Let's see here. Thoughts on Chase Claypool? I mean, I wish the Colts would have drafted him. I don't know how he was not a first-round pick. Thing is, though, we'll see later in the year. I mean, I hope he can keep all those production, those numbers and stuff too, but I feel like hopefully they don't start like locking in on him more. But
I think he's hurt this week. I think
really?
That they said that he's designated out for this week.
I didn't see that, but there's a lot of news in sports. Hard to keep up with it.
Absolutely.
I mean, 4 touchdowns last week. He had to have been the player of the week.
I think he was. He had 3 receiving touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown.
Yeah.
Like, I called it from the beginning of the season. Like, obviously Juju and Deontay Johnson are great receivers there in Pittsburgh, but I was like, everybody needs to watch. After watching Claypool last season, that dude is going to absolutely become Big Ben's favorite, and he last week definitely showed it.
I don't think a player I've followed at Notre Dame has gradually went up as much as Claypool. Every single year he gets a little bit better. Like last year, even like he got off to a slow start the second half of the year, man, he just completely exploded. He was the best player on the field every time. Like he's getting better and better and better. And he's like one of those players who is finally like reaching his potential. I mean, if he reaches his potential, it's crazy. What questions we got on here? Indy kept ETN in check mostly in 2015.
Going to Wisconsin, game at Soldier Field in 2021.
Absolutely. I mean, this podcast should be filmed from Pittsburgh right now. I should be at the Harp and Fiddle in Pittsburgh, where I was at back in 2015, hanging out with my boy Johnny Romano, and hopefully hanging out with Stephon Tuitt at some point there in Pittsburgh. So I should be in Pittsburgh right now. 2 weeks ago, I should have been at Lambeau, but next year, if they allow fans, I'm definitely going to Soldier Field. It's on the bucket list. That's going to be an awesome game there.
Absolutely.
And let's see, 2018. Yeah, Notre Dame held Etienne in check. He only ran for like 38 yards. Like the problem in the playoffs was not Notre Dame's defense. Notre Dame's defense stood in there. I mean, they gave up a lot of points, but that's because they were on the field the whole game. It was definitely the offense. So,
like you said, and when Love went out, that completely changed the dynamic of the game for the defense. When you have a guy that you can set out there on an island one-on-one and say, hey, shut that guy down so we can take care of the rest of the offense, it really, really makes a big difference. And so I think that's what is going to be the biggest thing for Notre Dame going into Clemson this year is are they going to have a guy that they can set out there and say, hey, you lock them down so we can put more in the box and stop Etienne and Lawrence? Or are they just going to get burnt all game, and then it's going to be, they're going to have to play back in zone? You just never know what's going to happen. So hopefully one of those guys will emerge as a true lockdown corner.
I've been thinking about that game. I'm just thinking, like, if everything was normal and that game was coming around, like, I could imagine Clemson going out there the first drive and being first down or second down, third down, and get a sack, like, to start the game against Clemson. Could you imagine how loud that crowd would be? Like, it'd be so hard for Clemson. Like, anything Clemson would do wrong, the crowd would be insanely loud. Like, I honestly think it's going to be like rival the Notre Dame USC game back in 05 and Notre Dame versus Miami 88, Florida State 93. Like, it was going to be so loud and just sucks. I mean, I think Clemson comes back to Notre Dame, South Bend probably sometime in the next 4 or 5 years, but it's just not going to be the same without that, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Our sleeper next year, Notre Dame versus Cincinnati 2021. You know what? I actually like Cincinnati as a program because we hang out in Cincinnati a lot. I have a best buddy there, so we like going to Nippert Stadium and watching that college football atmosphere. We're hanging out with our buddies, so that'll be a good game. Brian Kelly's old squad there in Cincinnati, so I always like seeing the Bearcats do good. Clemson hasn't played a game below 50 degrees out like 15 years. Yeah, like I'm trying to think, when would Clemson ever play a game below? I mean, I guess
Boston College maybe.
Yeah, they go up to Boston College. Syracuse is in the Dome. Like all those, and they don't play any non-conference opponents up north that I can think of. So, yeah, I mean, I hope it's completely snowing. I hope it's really chilly for them. So, All right, we're going to wrap up the podcast. Thanks for all the great questions, guys. Usually towards the end of the podcast, we have like like one or two people watching, and it's kind of dwindling down. But you guys killed it with all the questions here at the end. So
Absolutely.
thanks for watching, guys, and go Irish.
Yeah, absolutely. Go Irish.